All righty, here we go. It is a brand new Flyers Daily for the 31st of March, 2025. Flyers Daily presented by Ticketmaster. Make more memories live. You'll see Bill Meltzer here in just a moment. But before we get to Bill, I had a few things I wanted to say regarding the departure and firing of John Tortorella, a couple other things as well. Little week today, had my treatment on Thursday and I'm still in recovery mode from that. Did have my 53rd birthday yesterday. Kind of a different one than I've ever had before. I spent from the time they came and took my infusion pump off on Saturday morning at 10 until about 3 o'clock in the afternoon the next day, the next 30 hours or whatever. About 28 of it was spent sleeping. But it was good to have a birthday, and we're fighting to have many more. So that's what we're fighting for, even though this wasn't obviously ideal. It is what it is. And this is what needs to be done. But as far as the firing of John Tortorella, which went down last week, I was shocked at the timing with 9 games left that it happened. Didn't see that coming. Obviously, there were some things that took place over the final week, whether it was the benching of Cam York, which I was okay with the benching, as I mentioned here on the podcast, or it was what was said after the game about having no interest in coaching teams in this situation, which I think was frustration of a loss. And maybe I think his comments came out wrong and were misconstrued, but nonetheless, according to Danny Briere in his press conference that he gave later on Thursday, there's been other factors leading up to this. And I have no reason to doubt that and no reason to doubt Danny. And I'm not in those behind the scenes elements. So I don't know all the factors. I don't know all the details. All I know is that he's no longer here and the organization needs to move forward. And while I think that at the end of this season, there was going to be a serious conversation about whether he coached into the final year of his deal or not, and I thought that was unlikely. And we had talked about on this podcast and with Bill in particular on Mondays with Meltzer about potential replacements. And I put the audience to the test, you guys, and said, if you want him out, if not him, who is the right coach? And we'll get into some of that conversation with Bill Meltzer. I think there were some interesting names that have been thrown around. But in my experience with my Torts experience, and my Torts experience isn't maybe the same as other people's Torts experience, whether that's people that work for a team, that work in media, that work with him or in congruency with him. My experience was my experience. It was individual. So I don't know what it was like for other people. I was in favor of bringing him here. I thought that he was what the organization needed at the time Alain Vigneault was fired and Mike Yeo was eventually let go as the interim coach. I thought that somebody that could bring what Torts brings made sense for where the organization was. And I felt the organization was kind of adrift at sea with a lot of loss of its identity and its DNA and needed someone to come back in and recalibrate the organization. And I thought Torts was the right guy for that. And I think he did that. I think he did a good job with that. I think there's a lot of things he did a good job with. Was he perfect here? No. From the moment he was hired, well, let me take you back first. Before he was hired, in the year before he was hired, the exit day interviews at the end of that season, I sit down with players in a room, a conference room or whatever it might be. It's just me and the player, and we have a conversation. We tape it, and those are the exit day interviews that I run in the summer. When I got done taping my exit day interview with a particular player, it was Cam Atkinson. And it was clear that Mike Yeo was not going to be back as the head coach. He wasn't going to be named the replacement. He was just the interim coach. I said to Cam, what do you think about Torts being the next coach here? Is he what they need? Knowing, obviously, that Cam played for him for 6 years in Columbus and had some really productive years under him. And I talked to some other guys about Torts as well, whether it was Jody Shelley or some other guys that played for him. And Cam got up out of his chair and walked over to the door, shut the door, came back and sat down, and we talked about it for about 20 minutes about Torts as the next coach, and he was highly for it. Now, I remember that offseason and listening to Keith Yandel, who was with the Flyers that last year with AV, and listening to him on Spit and Chicklets talking about how good of a time he had as a Flyer, his season as a Flyer. The Flyers stunk out loud that year. They were horrible. It should have been a miserable year for Keith Yandel. Because when you're losing like that, it should not be fun. Being a professional, losing is not fun. It shouldn't have been fun to come to the rink. And that always stuck out to me. He said, one of the best years I had, most fun years I ever had, was my 1 year in Philly. And the Flyers were horrible that year. And I just kept thinking about that. I'm going, how can that be the case? How can a player that just went through what is a horrible season, the 21-22 season, say it was one of his most enjoyable? The Flyers went 25, 46, and 11 and finished with 61 points. They were minus 87 in goal differential. And he had as good a time as a pro as he did any other year. Now, I get he was here with Kevin Hayes and it was his buddy, but that told me something was really, really wrong. That was telling to me. He reiterated it, I think, last week on a different podcast. I think maybe it was Nasty Knuckles, about how good of a time that he had here in Philadelphia. Shouldn't have been a good time. So that told me there was something wrong. And as Cam and I talked, and he said, he's exactly what this organization needs to get it back on the right path, to have a standard and an accountability, and to bring this organization back to its roots, its DNA. And Cam's obviously a very cerebral guy, smart guy. He knows the DNA of the Flyers, even though he hadn't played here yet and just played here that 1 year. So I was highly in favor of Torts coming here. And I heard from guys that played for him that hated playing for him, but liked what he brought out of them. I heard guys that played for him that loved playing for him and almost got a kick out of the way he went about his business. But not every coach is going to be for every player. And you're going to see that. That happened with AV. That's happened with Mike Keenan. That's happened with every coach that there is, whether it's Joel Quenneville or you look back at the great coaches and Scotty Bowman. There's all coaches. Not all coaches are for everyone. And I thought Torts came in here and established that identity again of the organization and got it back on its moral path. And I think that's important. And I think he leaves that behind. And I thought it was interesting that you heard some of the veteran players, Travis Sanheim, Travis Konechny included, saying that, it is a tough day when the coach gets let go, and that they appreciated Torts for taking their game to another level. And I know some people say, well, he didn't develop any players. Well, I totally disagree. Even though I think a guy like Owen Tippett's not having as good a year as he did last year, I think there was some development under Torts. He's got a long way to go. I think Tyson Forster developed a lot of the key elements to his game under John Tortorella, elements that maybe under a different coach he wouldn't have, like 200-foot awareness and responsibility. And yeah, he still needs to develop his scoring ability, which he was drafted on. I think Cam York, the year prior, Torts was hard on him, and I thought that he stepped up and was their best individual player story of the season prior to this one in the way he defended. And I look at guys like Bobby Brink, who he was tough on. And I look at other guys too, whether it's Morgan Frost or Joel Farabee, and guys that aren't here. There's been a lot of turnover, and there was a lot of weeding out. And ultimately, how will his regime be looked at? It won't be looked at with glory because he didn't get to the playoffs. But he wasn't here to take the team to the playoffs. He was here for a different purpose at this point in his coaching career. And I don't know where it went sideways with he and management or management and he. I have no idea. But what I will tell you is this, and this is where we'll wrap up before we get to Bill. I got to know him on a much different level. I've gotten to know some of the Flyers coaches on just a more than a professional level. I obviously know Craig Berube very well. He was here for a long time. I got to know Peter Laviolette very well. Dave Haxtell, I didn't really ever get to know real well. And AV, the same thing, and maybe the bubble and all that plays a part in it. But Torts, I did. From the first interview we did after he was announced, he and I just seemed to hit it off. We seemed to think the game the same way. We talked for quite a bit after the interview, and we always had a lot of conversations about our opinions on this game and how it should be played and how it should be coached and how it should be policed and players should be held accountable. We always were in strong agreement on that. And obviously we agreed on some other things, whether that be our both of our passions for animal rescue and other elements. And I got to know Torts very well. And beyond just a guy that I did a podcast with and the other things. And when I got sick and I announced I got sick, he was one of the first people to reach out to me. He's been incredibly caring and gracious through this journey of my illness and dealing with getting chemotherapy and treatment. He checks on me multiple times a week. We talk once a week, and we check in via text multiple times a week. And he goes hard on me, like he is as a coach. Doesn't allow me to sulk and have excuses, and tells me not to F it up. and keep pushing like you would tell a player. And to me, I took that as a sign of respect from him. He's a good man. Is he complicated, like Danny said? Yeah, he definitely is. And maybe sometimes he's his own worst enemy. And his end becomes a self-fulfilling proposition, no doubt. But I have a lot of admiration for him as a man. I have a lot of admiration for him as a hockey coach. Was he perfect? No. Is he perfect as a man? No. Is he perfect as a coach? No. But I just wanted to have that say before we bring Bill in. So let's bring Bill in now from PhiladelphiaFlyers.com, NHL.com. We talk to him every Monday for Mondays with Meltzer. Bill Meltzer joins us now. Bill, how you doing?
I am I'm doing well. It's actually been kind of fun to be around the rink the last few days. It's always a good thing. And also, of course, a very, very happy, healthy birthday to you and many happy returns.
Yeah, it wasn't my ideal birthday, not the way you
sure.
plan on spending it for sure, but fighting this one to make sure we got many more to come down the road. So you hear my voice is a little weak. The initial recovery from this treatment was quite fine, actually, until they came and unhooked my pump on Saturday. And then I think I slept 33 of the next 36 hours. And just crazy. But we've lifted the fog. We played a little Metallica and got the fog out a little bit to do this episode. And there's obviously a ton to discuss. First of all, that being around the rink, it's different. Changing tides creates sometimes an air of excitement. And there is a changing tide with the dismissal of John Tortorella.
No, there is. And there's a, there's just a whole different vibe, right? Even though the wins and losses mean nothing now. And also, even though in all likelihood, and I mean, big part of me like to be proven wrong, but in all likelihood, Brad Shaw is just coaching the rest of this season as head coach, and the Flyers will move in another direction in terms of head coach. Hopefully, hopefully, at least with Brad Shaw having the option of staying on as assistant coach, but he does such a good job. But I've said it many times when we had Brad as assistant coach, as after an odd practice or after a morning skate, sometimes after a game, I love asking questions because he always gives really well thought out answers. Always, he's very cerebral, almost professorial in the way he responds to things. He always very thorough. And the other thing too that I liked the other night too, he didn't have to bring it up. He brought it up on his own. When the Flyers gave up that shorthanded goal in the third period, he didn't privately take responsibility to Sam Ersson for having the five forwards on the ice. He did it publicly too. It was like, that was my fault. That never should have happened, and it shouldn't have taken that to learn that.
Yeah.
Right. The thing with Brad is that he's just very humble, but very, but obviously very thorough, and he's just a great hockey guy. So I really, I enjoy dealing with him. Obviously, the circumstances are not what Shawzy himself would want, but it still is another opportunity to step behind the bench. So I want to see him do well.
Yeah, he is. He's a clinician. He's very clinical in his approach and very detailed, which is why he is such a good guy to coach and develop young D, because it's all about detail.
Yes.
And the head coach sometimes can't go down and get into the weeds like an assistant can. And he does that extremely effectively. And I think he's really good with using video to accentuate his points as well. And you're right. He's a highly intelligent man. He speaks the game at a high IQ level.
I like it this way. Brad Shaw was kind of John Tortorella's version of E.J. Maguire to Tortorella's Keenan.
Yeah.
That was really the dynamic between the two of them, and it worked well together because of their approaches complementing each other really well.
Yeah, and it's funny because they're so different in personality, but they've had such a good working relationship over many years. Bill, the 9 games to go with the season dwindling down, and we know how it's ending, and we know why it is with all the subtraction to the roster. How shocked were you that the dismissal came with 9 games to go for John Tortorella to be let go before the season's end?
I mean, I obviously didn't know what was going down.
Yeah.
There was going to. I did not think that John Tortorella was going to be back next season as head coach. I thought he might be the organization in some capacity or another. I thought the lame duck season was not beneficial for anybody.
And there wouldn't be a commitment to beyond that.
Yeah, correct. And so we're if you want to move forward for the big picture, I think you needed a different voice for next year. Did I expect it with 9 games left? No, I didn't. The way things kind of unraveled in the last few weeks, wasn't expecting that either. I thought that the Flyers kind of they pared down the roster clearly. The trade deadline. We've talked about how there are pieces that were traded that were not replaced with equivalent or better players, particularly.
Mm-hmm.
But it is what it is. What it is. I at least want to see them compete better, though. The game in Chicago, when we recorded after that, the game in Chicago really bothered me. It reminded me too much of some games late last season. From the opposite perspective, Now the Flyers, obviously, they're a lottery team, right? And they're playing for draft odds. Not playing for draft odds, but that's the effect.
Yeah.
Whereas a year ago, they were playing to get into the playoffs, and they were holding on to it, seeing it slip away. The game against Chicago really, really bothered me because that was a game against a team that they should have beaten. Even last weekend, that's a team they certainly could have beaten. And I didn't feel like I didn't like how they competed in that game. It was a brainless game, and it bothered me. And I asked this to Danny Briere at his press conference, and he said that wasn't that wasn't really a factor, kind of because it's late in the season. Wasn't going to put that on the coaching staff. What bothered me, what I was starting to see, was that the structure was falling apart. And the one thing the Flyers had, when all else failed, the one thing that John Tortorella put in place was a structure. That I think was the number one thing he accomplished with the team, where you want to establish a standard, whatever. That was his word of choice.
A blueprint of a way to play. Yeah.
And I thought that at the very least there was that in place. Whether he moved on after the season, whether he finished the contract or whatever, there was that structure that was in place. A couple of years ago, Jason, we railed about a few times. How many times did the Flyers give up a goal that started out of the defensive zone corner because there's nobody over the middle?
Yeah. We see the memes on Twitter, Bill, where everybody was puck watching on one side of the ice and two guys are on the other side of the ice hanging out waiting for it.
Yeah, way too many times. And that every team has that every once in a while, but way too often. And that was knocked out of the team's game to a very large extent. I saw it sliding, really starting to slide. Even the Flyers did have those games against top teams where they were competitive, losing, but competitive in those games because they were able to keep those pretty structured, low event, whatever. Mm-hmm. But where the Flyers kind of took a step forward, I thought a year ago, was their ability to do that, to be structured, but to turn that into transition.
Yeah.
They
lost that ability this year with all the losses. They just couldn't play transition hockey anymore.
They couldn't. They had to play that other way. And then at the very end, even the part of taking away the middle of the ice, blocking shots, the little things that at least keep you close in a game.
Yeah.
There's obviously the goaltending piece too. That's an off-season issue that has to be addressed early on. But just in terms of the 5-on-5 structure and whatever, I saw it was slipping, and I was concerned it was going to just keep on slipping over the remaining games. So, and the 2 games since then, they've been pretty wide open hockey.
Yeah.
For the play, from watching, they've actually been entertaining games. But those are the way the Flyers played the last couple of games. Offensively was a lot of fun to watch. But in terms of how you have to play to win games, no. At this point, it was really kind of pretty wide open.
Fire wagon hockey, as Doc Emmerich would say.
Fire wagon hockey.
Yeah, not a lot of structure to it on either side, and teams just kind of trading chances and playing that. It's an undisciplined early season type of hockey, and it's like a fresh and new kind of thing that comes when there's a change like that. I thought the one thing, Torch's biggest job, I thought, in coming here, and I cited this before you came on, was getting the organization back on its DNA, back to its DNA, its path of being a team that works hard, plays with structure, plays for each other, and plays with that dignity of the Flyers logo. I thought they had lost that. And in talking to Cam Atkinson prior to Tortorella being hired, he said that's exactly what they need. And I cited that Keith Yandel interview on Spitting Chicklets when he said right away, one of my funnest years playing in the NHL was my year with the Flyers. I brought up their record that year, Bill. They were hideous that year. They went 25, 46, and 11. There's no guy that's a professional athlete that should be saying he had a good time that year and one of the best years of his life. It's a country club at that point.
Yeah.
That's one thing that he did change. Yeah. And that's one thing that has to ride into the future, that has to remain, is that commitment to the organization's DNA.
No, for sure. And there's an adjustment period because the leadership needs to change. I thought the most telling thing that Daniel Briere said in his press conference was this is an opportunity for guys who were reluctant to speak up, because Tortorella could be,
in ways it's his room.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly. So here's an opportunity, right? You can feel free to speak up. You can feel free to kind of take charge a little bit too. On the ice, in the room, you have something to say it, right? This is an opportunity as they're going forward, as they want to start building pieces in. They've subtracted. It's been a lot of subtraction.
19 pieces, Bill, of 35 that when Danny Briere took over.
Yeah,
that's a lot.
and all quality people to a man, and good hockey players too. Yep. It's all about the mix, and now they really have to add pieces, add talent, and
find a coach,
find the mix that works, and a coach, and the right coach that will. Some of it's also adapting to the players you have on the roster.
Yeah.
I do think that the days of everyone has to fit into the way the coach wants you to play, as long as everybody's clear on what you're doing, I think that's needed, that's necessary. You hear a lot of coaches, particularly who've coached semi-recently, where they say that the biggest difference between this generation and previous generations of players is that the previous generations, because I said so, was good enough.
Yeah.
They want to know why. Why do you want me? And it's not that they won't comply even, but they want to know, why do you want me to do that? It's I think that's part of the reason why now with John Tortorella gone, Lindy Ruff is the oldest coach that's remaining in the NHL. He was born in 1960. I think Lindy's kind of close to the end.
Yep.
Just like the players, the coaches are getting younger and younger too. So they're, I'm really interested to see where the Flyers go with the next steps behind the bench. So we're still going to have a lot to talk about in that regard once the season's over with, once they evaluate where they want to go. But the easiest thing to do is to get rid of the head coach. That's one guy. And I don't believe in piling on. I have a mixed take on John Tortorella's tenure, which is something we might discuss at another time. But the bottom line is this: whatever steps they take to move ahead, I think that they really have to carefully consider. When you talk about standard and identity, okay, what standard and identity do you want to take it to as your next step? And what personnel are the right guys to add to do that? Obviously, a big piece of that is adding an upgrade in talent on the top end of your lineup, and that's something too that's not really going to be in the coach. That will be on the front office to add those pieces. I think that the Flyers have had a lot of guys who are middle of the lineup guys, and but that's kind of what you had. You had a lot of middle of the lineup guys playing on the upper end of the lineup, and whereas they could be good support pieces, they're not necessarily the right top dog to have. And I think that's on the blue line. It's certainly down the middle. That's like an A1 thing. In goal, Who's your okay? You go with a tandem, but who's the 1A in that 1A 1B tandem? Because when you get to like you're in a playoff chase, who's going to be in net for those games that you have to win down the stretch? Because at that point, it's not 1A 1B anymore. You identify your goalie.
You're riding the hot guy, whoever that is of those two, and you're hoping it's your 1A that you're paying to do that.
Yeah,
I think the other you get too many guys asking to hit above their weight class. And that's a problem. It's a team that's not slotted correctly yet. That process likely begins this summer. But I was listening to the Kipper and Bourne podcast earlier on Sunday, and I want to play this clip for you because Doug MacLean mentions two names, and one of them I think is fairly obvious to mention. The other one I was a little shocked that I heard him mention. So here's Doug MacLean on Kipper and Bourne from this weekend in regards to the next head coach of the Philadelphia Flyers.
Nobody can tell me this was the one comment the other night, which he deserved to be fired for, in my opinion, especially with a young team that's in a rebuilding process and a new management team. Nobody ever, I didn't think he would survive. I thought it was the perfect way to get him out of there and start fresh with the guy I mentioned 3 months ago on this show should be the coach, and that's Tocchet. So then I heard it's going to be Tocchet or Quenneville. So it'll be real interesting to see who gets the job. We got to keep tabs on whether I'm ever right or not on this show.
We're going to keep that tab on Doug MacLean.
Sure. I would be shocked.
I'd be
shocked if Joe Quenneville is the next Flyers head coach. I don't think Quenneville will coach again. Actually, I was just talking about how John Tortorella was the final active head coach, was born in the 50s, and Lindy Ruff was the last one that was born in 1960. Right, that's getting younger. I'm not saying that that's the be all and end all, but I do think they'll go with a younger guy. The thing with Todd,
Quenneville's a finisher. Quenneville's a finisher, though. He's not a
developer. The reason for bringing John Tortorella in the first place was to try to establish an identity, to build something. I don't think Joe Quenneville's the right next step to take.
Yeah.
Again, we'll see. And it's weird as far as Talk goes, because I love Talk. I love him as a player, right? I like him as a person, and I respect him as a coach. A lot of his philosophies are not that far apart from John Tortorella.
And tactics, yeah.
So philosophically, they see things a lot the same way. The way that they'll deal with people covering the team is quite different because Talk won't take it out on beat writers and those kind of things. Tortorella will take it out of just about anybody around him in the wrong mood.
Yeah,
and that's just as John, who he is. But in terms of Talk as head coach, I don't know that's really the step to take, and I don't think it's relevant. But I will mention that Talk actually interviewed for the Flyers head coaching role when the Flyers had that big process where John Tortorella was eventually hired. Now that was a whole different management group, right?
Yep. And they brought in that consultancy group to help them.
Chuck Fletcher, it was Dave Scott. It was a different group. Yeah. So it's really really different people doing the evaluating and making the decision. But I think that. I think they're going to end up going in a direction where it'll be a name that's not the name that are immediately speculated. They're really the
low-hanging fruit. It's low-hanging. Talk's obviously low-hanging fruit because of his affiliation with the organization.
Yes.
And I think that's where Doug's going. Like, it makes sense. So he's miserable in Vancouver. He's going to want out. Philly's going to need a coach after Tortorella. He makes sense to bring in there. Old team hires the old tough player type thing. Yeah. And I know, look, the narrative's out there. Flyers better not hire another former Flyer. Like, okay, look, Tortorella wasn't a former Flyer. Dave Haxtell wasn't a former Flyer. Laviolette wasn't a former Flyer. Berube was. They went on to win a cup. There's been many coaches. Terry Murray. Back through the years.
Yeah.
I'm not hiring former players here. You just got to hire the right guy. If Rod Brindamore was available and you thought he was the right guy, I'm not hiring him because he put on the jersey as a player.
Right. We have a lot of distinction and whatever. Yeah. And Vigneault obviously was another guy who never worked a day for the Flyers.
Yeah.
And you're talking about the last couple of hires have been veteran coaches who've been to or won a Stanley Cup at some point in their careers.
Yep.
So the Flyers have gone down that route years ago. Although Ken Hitchcock had been an assistant coach here for a couple of years, but he found his head coaching success elsewhere, won a cup in Dallas or whatever.
Yeah.
He said the Flyers have done the veteran head coach route. They've done the hiring a completely unproven college coach route.
Yeah.
I just want to see someone who can put the team on the right path, whether that takes 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. I would like to see the next hire be someone who I could feel reasonably comfortable will have tenure. I think you need a little bit of a younger coach. I don't think you're the youngest coach, but a coach at a certain age and experience range might be somebody who has been through the ups and downs of coaching in the National Hockey League. Very different from coaching in college.
Yeah, big time.
Right? College coaching, if you're winning, you have immense job security.
Yep.
Whereas in the NHL, you are truly hired to be fired, and you can be the coach in a rebuilding situation where you've been touted as a future head coach for however long, and you could go to a team that's still not winning, and you pay the price for it. I'm thinking specifically of Luke Richardson.
Yeah.
Luke was touted.
It's canned in Chicago for nothing he can do.
Absolutely nothing he can do.
Yep.
And that's the nature of the beast. I mean, hockey, the NHL level, of course, it's a business, but it's a very hard business.
It's cold business. It's very cold.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to fire friends.
Yep. And why do coaches get fired in the NHL? Because it seems to work.
Yeah.
A lot of times it does in a lot of situations.
Yeah.
I think you got to look at. I think it's important to look at the coaches that are having success now. I think you got to look at a guy like John Cooper, who didn't play high-level hockey. He was a lawyer, for goodness sake, and the only reason he got into coaching was because he was coaching at junior B level when he started. But he's a cerebral man. He knows how to lead men. I look at Carberry. I think you got to look at all of those elements of successful coaches in today's game, and you find your piece that can check a lot of those boxes, but that knows who he is. Yeah. Because you can't fake it as a coach, because the players will see right through you in that locker room.
No doubt. I mean, you're the coaching personality at the in the other levels. It's all about developing the players as well as about winning. You're trying to bring guys up to fit into the system there to play a certain way. And it may translate, it may not translate. You mentioned Carberry, right? Ton of success. I think that Nelson will get a chance in the NHL. Maybe
people will look at him if they hired him and they say, "Oh, what did he do when he was an NHL coach? He stunk. He's no good." But a lot of times it's the second run for a coach where he learns from the first run mistakes.
Quenneville didn't have immediate success.
I brought up Bill Belichick last week. I mean, Belichick in Cleveland stunk, and now he's the best coach ever.
and it's not just in hockey. Like look at Terry Francona, right? Remember the great manager when he got his first chance of the Phillies when they were not a very good team, and he didn't get them very far.
And he goes to Boston and leads that epic comeback and ends the drought. No, you're right. I mean, there's an arc of development for coaches too. Just because they're older individuals doesn't mean they don't have an arc and they don't learn from past experience. David Carl, I mean, obviously, he's a big name out there. He's had such great success with the World Junior team collegiately. Do you think it's unlikely they go in that direction again? Not because Dave Hackstall, but because, I mean, he's going to want 5 years and the commitment of commitments. So I just don't know that they go in that direction if that's the right direction for them.
I would say it's on the less likely side of the spectrum. I don't put I don't have him for this situation as the guy that I think they're leaning towards.
Yeah.
Not because he was born in 1989, but specifically because of that. They want a coach who it's a multi-year process when you're making that transition.
It's navigated these waters, if you will.
Yeah, for sure. And it's I think he's going to be a heck of an NHL head coach at some point. He has all the tools to do it. He's here's another example, a guy who's now having a lot of success. Right, look at Knobloch, and now mind you, he has the benefit of having coaching McDavid in Draisaitl, and he coached McDavid in junior hockey. But when he had the opportunity here as the power play coach, that's when the power play started to decline. Not because of him either.
Yeah.
Right. But he wasn't immediately ready to jump from junior hockey to an NHL job. Same thing with a collegiate coach. You can make the transition, but I think it takes a little bit of time. And I know that Danny has said many times, and I'll probably continue to say, the players will determine the pace of the rebuild. But I know they want to add too, and I think that having a coach in where you're starting to come out of the subtraction, the adding side of a rebuild,
the positive side of it, you're starting to enter that territory. No,
for sure, and I think that that's where you want to have a coach with, at least I think, a little bit of experience, that he's been through his own learning curve.
Yeah, no doubt. I think the other thing too is the collegiate coach hasn't navigated those waters yet of the professional athlete, but nurtured a lot of, teaching and that kind of stuff, which is good. I look at, you look at some of the guys that are available around the league, whether that's Mike Sullivan that's going to be available. Maybe he's too close to what Torts was. Having been a disciple of Torts, do they look in that direction of a Todd Nelson or, an AHL coach? Do they go with a European coach, which is incredibly rare in today's NHL? Do you have a Russian on your staff in light of Michkov? There's a lot of elements to this decision that are profoundly important. But ultimately, they've got to be unified in the vision of where this team's going and the timeline it's going to take to get there. I think that's a big, big part of the equation as well. So we'll see how that does play out, and we'll see if Brad Shaw, imagine he'll get an interview, he'll get a look. And if he remains here in Philadelphia, I think that's a big part of the equation as well. So we'll see how that all is going to play out over time. Bill, real quick, looking at, some of the young players, Luchanko up, we'll see bump eventually. Bjornsson, I think, got banged up in his last game, unfortunately, but Luchanko comes up, gets an assist. Grebenkin is putting up power play goals. I know you've been checking in on the Phantoms. What have you seen out of some of the new additions there, bolstering that lineup for the playoffs?
Well, obviously, Luchanko is a really exciting addition. Phantoms last year got through the miniseries. I think they certainly are capable of that again. I'd like to see them at least win a second round. When you get to the best of fives, I think they're capable of it. There's always the goaltending piece. Cal Peterson he's a good American League goalie, but there's a level of trust that I think you have to have. I mean, honestly, I think that part of the whole thing with Kolosov is there's a greater level of trust at the American League level with Peterson than there's been with Kolosov. I think the Phantoms.
That's frightening. That's telling.
I have no idea still have no idea what to expect from Kolosov.
Yeah.
So he's up here. I suspect that the rest of the season will play out still with Sam Ersson and Fedotov as the goalies. The Flyers probably just added a collegiate player who will make his NHL debut, and then they think he'll join
Dorwart.
Yeah.
What do you think of him? Upside at the NHL, bottom six?
Oh, absolutely a bottom six forward. I think that's where he's targeted. Good two-way guy. Competitive, a little bit of feistiness to him. Not gonna crush guys, but he won't back down. He'll have his opportunity. It might come at a guy like Abels' expense, but you're talking about a much younger hockey player. He'll have his run up here, and signing a player out of college like that and burning the first year of his entry level. There's no use complaining about it because it's the cost of doing business. You had to burn the ELC. That's just
that you're not getting them. It's that simple. Somebody else is going to do it.
Yeah. So I'm interested to see him play. I want to see guys who've already come up. I mean, the Flyers have already burned through all their non-emergency call-ups. They can't use a regular call. Now there is an emergency call to be made. Then you can call up whoever you want. Different with the collegiate guy, because that's not a call-up. That's an ELC. So it's not an American League transaction. That's why the Flyers could add him immediately to the NHL roster. I want to see some of those guys kind of make their case. I'll tell you what one of the and it's an American League level story, but even so, like how all the work that Zayd Wisdom has put in, he was all but out of pro hockey.
Yeah,
and
he's fought back big time.
He's fought back big time, and he's been really, really, really good for the Phantoms the last several months, really. Could he work his way into competing for a fourth line kind of a role? Those are the kind of things I'm looking for with the Phantoms going ahead. I think Lappy has the team playing a pretty good brand of hockey a lot of nights. They're competitive.
Yeah.
It's not a big trick making the postseason in that division, because all but two teams in that division get into the playoffs, and the bottom two teams are just not very good. The last place team, Bridgeport, is really not good. They're the worst team in the American League, as a matter of fact. So you eliminate them from it. So, but it's really about just being as good as they could be, getting themselves ramped up for the postseason for a third straight year, and seeing how far they can take it. So that will really be interesting. And and I'll say last thing at the NHL level, one thing that it's been just delightful to watch. It's been a lot of fun to watch. Having Michkov on left wing, where it was always, he didn't, not comfortable on the left wing, whatever. He wants to play on the right side. Well, look how that line's been working.
Yeah.
And with him on the left, that opened so many possibilities.
Yeah.
Where there's so many more combinations you can do where you can deploy Michkov on either wing, and can be successful with the right line mates. So,
to me, he's a positionless offensive player anyway.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think that. I mean,
Bill, he's a budding superstar. It's all there.
No question.
There's no doubt about it. They got
no question. He makes some. His anticipation, his hockey IQ, and especially on the offensive level, right? It's off the charts. The second goal that he scored in Saturday's game was just crazy. That's a play where he's moving into the circle.
Yeah.
He sees a defender who's about to check him, so he stays on the backhand. And you could
a disadvantaged position, mind you.
Yeah,
stays
for
on
sure,
it. Yep.
Right? For sure. It was a read that if I keep the puck in the backhand, and he surprised the goalie, and it was a heck of a shot too. That's the kind of like instantaneous decision making that the special players make. That was a crazy goal. That was a goal like wow. When I look at Michkov, I said this to Adam Kimmelman from NHL.com sitting next to me. It's like, we're looking at a 50-goal, 50-assist guy. That's what he's going to be.
He's going to be Nikita Kucherov.
Yeah, no doubt.
I mean, he looks so much like him to me. There's some differences in their game, but to me, he's the guy that looks like he can produce at that level.
Yeah.
And the way he's finishing since Four Nations and what he's learned this year, getting him over here when you did, how to train and get ready for an NHL season. Like,
big thing, yeah.
I mean, he is going to be if there's one thing we should all agree on as Flyers fans, I know there's a lot of division, is that this guy at number 7 was an absolute steal. And he is you have your star. He is going to be not an all-star, a superstar.
Yeah.
Because he rises to the moment in the big times. He doesn't shy away from it. He's a freak, not in size or stature, but in freaking his ability and his vision on the ice. It's incredibly exciting to have that cornerstone piece there, no doubt about it. Bill, great stuff. We'll read Bill's work at PhiladelphiaFlyers.com, also on NHL.com. We'll be back tomorrow as well. The Flyers play tonight, correct? Yeah, Flyers are back tonight.
They play tonight, yeah.
So we'll recap that game coming up tomorrow. So join us then on a brand new Flyers Daily.